She only had $4 for a blind date and sat there in a maid's uniform. But when a Mafia boss at the next table noticed her, everything changed. Not with a threat, not with a gun, but with a single silent gesture. What did he see in her? Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I miss you all so much. How have you been? Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to click that subscribe button, give this a like, and drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know if this story reaches you all the way in Canada, the United States, Australia, the UK, or anywhere else across the globe. So go ahead, let me know in the comments. Where in the world are you joining me from today? Now let's begin. The chandelier above her table looked like it cost more than her sister's entire medical treatment. Maybe more than the hospital bill and the funeral package Maya had once jokingly picked out, back when humor was easier than hope. Elizabeth Andrews sat beneath it like a cracked teacup in a diamond showroom, her posture straight, her uniform crisp, her palms sweating against the worn leather of a purse that had seen too many paychecks come and go. She checked her phone again. 7:46 p.m. The text had come 12 minutes ago, the screen now dim, mocking her with its finality. Sorry, something came up. Can't make it. You understand. No punctuation, no apology, no effort. Just a quick tap of the thumb by a man named Derek who'd seemed charming through the screen and disposable in person. Or rather, not in person. He hadn't even bothered to lie creatively. Elizabeth slipped the phone into her purse, fingers brushing the crumpled $5 bill inside. Correction, $4.37. She'd used 63 cents for the bus fare here, rationalizing it as part of the experience. Maya had begged her to go. Live for both of us, her sister had whispered from her hospital bed, thin fingers curled around Elizabeth's wrist. Don't cancel again. Don't make everything about me. So Elizabeth had dressed in her cleanest clothes, her maid uniform, the only thing without stains or holes, and arrived on time. She had even powdered her face in the bathroom of the bus station, squinting into the cracked mirror and deciding she still looked okay. Tired, maybe. Sharp-cheeked. Pretty in a way that didn't require makeup. She knew how to make herself small in rich places, how to fade into the shine. But tonight, she hadn't planned to. Tonight, she was supposed to feel like someone worth showing up for. Excuse me, miss? The server's voice had the exact intonation of someone about to ask her to leave. Elizabeth glanced up. He was blonde, 30-ish, with a starch collar and a jaw that looked like it had never bitten into anything under $40. His smile was perfectly laminated. Will you be ordering? She hesitated. Her fingers brushed the purse again. She could afford tap water. Maybe a dinner roll, if they didn't charge for it. Maybe. Just water, she said. With lemon, if that's okay. The server's smile didn't break, but his eyes flicked down to her uniform, then past her to the surrounding tables. Men in tailored suits, women in whispering silk. A chef's special had been announced earlier with the gravity of a royal decree. Lobster medallions with saffron foam. She barely understood the words. Still waiting for someone? The server asked, tone oozing sympathy with a hint of smug. Elizabeth nodded once, jaw tight. Yes. He turned and left without a word. A moment later, a glass of water appeared. One wedge of lemon floated in it like a sad little raft. No bread. No smile this time. Elizabeth stared at the condensation on the glass, her back burning with shame and something sharper, pride. Rage, maybe. She should leave. Should take her dignity and walk out. But Maya's voice echoed again. Live for both of us. So she stayed. Across the room, partially hidden behind a marble column and a towering orchid, Philip Matthew observed her like a man watching the last scene of a foreign film with no subtitles, but knowing exactly what it meant. He hadn't come to dine. He rarely did in public anymore, not since his face had started to become a name whispered in the backs of kitchens, in the shaky voices of bookkeepers who'd skimmed one too many envelopes. But tonight he had business. A manager stealing profits. The man now limped out the back door with a lesson Philip rarely had to teach twice. He stayed afterward, out of habit, nursing a glass of Bordeaux from a vintage older than most of the staff. And then he'd seen her, the woman in a maid's uniform, seated like she belonged to no one and nothing in this place. She hadn't ordered, hadn't eaten. She looked abandoned. But more than that, deliberately unbroken. Philip watched her shoulders stiffen after the message on her phone. He learned to read people the way others read spreadsheets. Something hurt her, but she refused to shrink. Pride. He recognized it, understood it like breath. He saw the lemon wedge. He saw the hunger she tried to disguise behind that water glass. And he felt something peculiar stir. Garçon. His voice was low, quiet, but it carried like a commandment. The server appeared almost instantly. Yes, Mr. Matthew. Philip didn't look away from Elizabeth. The young woman. The one in uniform. The waiter blinked. Yes, sir. She's my guest now. Bring her the tasting menu. The 15 Bordeaux. And the same service I receive. Am I clear? Yes, Mr. Matthew. Philip's gaze didn't soften. She is not to be made aware of this as charity. You understand? Of course, sir. Elizabeth didn't look up until the first plate arrived. It was delicate, small enough to fit in the palm of her hand, and plated like a miniature art piece. Scallops, she thought. Something creamy beneath it. Parsnip puree? I didn't, she started. Compliments of the house, the waiter said, smiling now like a man who'd seen God. More dishes followed. Risotto. Duck. A salad with edible flowers. Her table transformed from a symbol of humiliation into a strange miracle. Other diners began to glance her way, with envy now instead of derision. And still, Elizabeth didn't touch the food. She sat perfectly still, lips pressed, hands in her lap. She looked toward the next table. He was there. Dark suit, no tie, shirt open enough to hint at tattoos beneath. His hair was sharp. His eyes, somehow darker than black, met hers across the table divide. He raised his glass. A silent toast. Elizabeth's lips parted. She hesitated, then raised her own water glass. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't look away. He stood, and then he was there, at her table. May I? He asked, voice velvet wrapped around steel. Elizabeth tilted her head, cautious. You sent this. It seemed a crime to let you suffer that lemon wedge alone. She blinked. That's a strange definition of crime. He smiled. Then let's say misfortune. Easily corrected. She hesitated. Why? Because I was once stood up to? He didn't elaborate. And because you stayed. She didn't know what to say. So she reached for the fork. The scallop melted in her mouth. His smile widened slightly. Philip Matthew. Elizabeth Andrew. He didn't offer a handshake. She liked that. You always save women in distress? She asked. Only the ones who pretend they're not. She swallowed. They talked. He didn't pry. Didn't ask why she was in a Maid uniform or why her hands were so careful around the crystal glasses. He asked what book she liked. If she believed in luck. If she knew the stars over the city looked different than the ones in the country. She told him about her sister. About hospitals and schedules and the kind of exhaustion you don't sleep off. He listened. Not politely. Not performatively. He listened like her words mattered. When the check came, she reached instinctively for her purse. He laid down his card without looking. Then, slowly, he reached into his inner jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope. Take it, he said. She froze. No, it's not charity. What is it then? An investment. In what? His eyes met hers. Your tomorrow. She stared at the envelope. Everything in her wanted to refuse. But then she thought of Maya. Of unpaid treatments. Of 4 bags and tears. Her pride was loud. But hunger, real hunger for more than food, was louder. She took it. Not for herself, but for the chance to stay someone who hadn't broken yet. And as he stood to leave, placing a business card on the white linen beside her glass, she realized something terrifying. She wanted to see him again. The business card he left behind sat untouched for a full minute after he walked away. It wasn't just paper. It felt heavier than it should. Thick cardstock, cream with black embossed lettering. Minimalistic. It simply read, Philip Matthew. Private consulting, discretion guaranteed. 555-019-3411. No website. No address. No job title. The kind of card that meant everything or nothing depending on who you handed it to. Elizabeth stared at it like it might combust in her hand. Then she slipped it into her purse. She didn't need another bite, even though the duck had been divine and the wine had made her mouth feel like velvet. She left the restaurant still hungry in some strange, new way. 3 days passed. In the hospital, Maya noticed the difference immediately. "You're glowing," her sister said through a rasp, eyes sharp beneath dark circles. "What happened?" "I'm not glowing," Elizabeth said, adjusting the foreline like a nurse even though she wasn't one. "It's just the fluorescent lights." Maya coughed, wincing. "Is this about the date?" "It wasn't a date." "Oh God," Maya whispered dramatically. "He was hot, wasn't he?" "Maya, tell me, was he tall? Dangerous?" With one of those voices that makes you think about doing bad things for good reasons. Elizabeth closed her eyes. "He's a man I met. That's all." Maya raised an eyebrow, what she liked to call her bullshit detector. "Did you talk?" "We did." "Did he make you laugh?" Elizabeth didn't answer, but Maya caught the slight curve at the corner of her mouth. "I knew it," she said. "He made you laugh. You haven't laughed in forever. What's his name?" "Philip." "Oh, that's such a rich man name," Maya crooned. "What does he do?" Elizabeth hesitated. "Said he solves problems." "That's vague and hot." "He's not. This isn't anything." "But you kept the card?" Silence. Maya smiled weakly and rolled her head back onto the pillow. "Call him." "I'm not calling a stranger." "He fed you seared duck and parsnip foam, right?" "That's not a real thing." "It is now," Maya said. "Call him." "What's the worst that could happen?" Elizabeth didn't answer. But that night, alone in her apartment, she held the card again. She called. He answered on the second ring. "Matthew, it's Elizabeth from the restaurant." There was a pause, then a shift in tone. "Hello, Elizabeth. I'm not sure why I called. You gave me this card." "I did. And I've never been the type to follow up on things like that. I'm not good at mystery. You sound just fine at it." "I don't want anything," she blurted. "Not money or favors. I know." That silenced her. His voice softened. "Are you all right?" She wasn't sure how to answer. The words came out before she could think them through. "My sister's getting worse. There's an experimental treatment, but she caught herself." "Sorry, that's not your problem." "I didn't ask out of obligation." She bit her lip. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have called." "Elizabeth." Her name, spoken like a secret. "I'm glad you did." The next night, they met again. This time, not at Chateau Lumiere. Philip had given her an address. A small cafe tucked between a laundromat and a tattoo parlor on the east side. She'd almost turned around when she saw the neon flickering sign. Tony's Grill, cash only, open 24/7. But Philip was there already, seated in a booth, black shirt rolled at the sleeves, forearms inked and folded, a mug of coffee in front of him like it was the most natural thing in the world. Elizabeth approached cautiously. "No chandeliers?" she said. Philip looked up, smiled. "Thought we'd try something more honest." She slid into the booth, unsure why her heart was pounding. A waitress brought her a menu. Greasy fingerprints and laminated edges. "You sure this is your scene?" Elizabeth asked. Philip shrugged. "I own it." That made her pause. "You own Tony's Grill?" "And 3 places like it. Most nights they run themselves. I just check in." She looked around. Vinyl seats. A cook cursing in Spanish behind the counter. A sign that read no refunds. Ever. Why? Because places like this don't lie. You don't come here to impress anyone. You come here because it's 2 a.m. and you need pancakes. She smirked. "So you're a pancake philosopher now?" "Something like that." The waitress returned with a fresh pot of coffee, poured without asking. Elizabeth wrapped her hands around the mug. The heat felt good. Solid. "I never said thank you," she said. "For the dinner. The rescue." "It wasn't charity," he said. "So you said." "It was instinct." "Instinct to what?" "Save the sad girl in the Maid uniform." He didn't flinch. "You weren't sad. You don't know that." "You weren't sad," he repeated. "You were angry and proud and hungry. For food. For something to go right." She looked down at the table. "You're very good at reading people." He sipped his coffee. "It's a requirement in my line of work." "Which is?" He tilted his head. "Still solving problems." She narrowed her eyes. "You always this cryptic?" "No," he said. "Only with people who ask good questions." She sat back. "You're impossible." "I'm persistent." "That's not always a good thing." "For most people, no. And for you, I've never had the luxury of being anything else." They talked until the cafe dimmed the lights, signaling closing time. Elizabeth hadn't noticed the hours pass. She hadn't eaten, too caught up in his stories, the way he listened without interruption, the quiet gravity in how he saw things. She told him about Maya, about their parents, about her 3 jobs, her dream to finish college, the way life seemed to put its boot on your neck every time you try to breathe. And she noticed something she hadn't before. He never pitied her. When she spoke, he didn't wince or nod in performative empathy. He just heard her, like he knew the cost of surviving with grace. When it was time to go, he stood and walked her to the corner where her bus would stop. She glanced at him under the streetlight. He looked different out here. Less immaculate. More real. Still dangerous, maybe, but not dangerous to her. "Thank you," she said again. "For tonight." "You don't owe me thanks." "I don't think I do." He reached into his coat, held out another envelope. She frowned. "I said I didn't want. It's not money." She took it, opened it. Inside, a brochure for a community scholarship program. An application already half filled. Her name printed neatly at the top. "I made a few calls," he said. "They're looking for candidates. It's not a handout. You need to interview." Her breath caught. "You did this, why?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because sometimes a spark needs kindling. Not saving. Just a little air." She swallowed. Her hands trembled slightly. "I don't trust you," she said. "I wouldn't expect you to. But I might someday." His smile was quiet. "I'll wait." The machines near Maya's hospital bed hummed like background noise to a war Elizabeth couldn't win. For a while, they'd had hope. The chemo had shrunk the tumors. Maya's voice had regained some of its old playfulness. She'd even made a joke about wigs, said she wanted to try hot pink next time. But in the last week, everything shifted. The blood work was worse. The scans showed new lesions. The doctors had started talking like weather forecasters, full of ifs and maybes and preparing for different outcomes. Elizabeth stared at the printout of the treatment proposal. It cost more than she made in a year, experimental, not covered by insurance. A clinical trial that had only 3 open slots remaining. The envelope in her purse was already crinkled from how many times she'd opened it, stared at the brochure inside, and closed it again. The scholarship application Philip had given her. She hadn't filled it out. Not because she didn't want it, but because she didn't know how to say yes to things that weren't survival. Now, the future wasn't just something distant. It was counting down. Every beep from Maya's monitor felt like a tick on a clock that only moved forward. So Elizabeth stood in the hallway outside the oncology ward, the taste of metal in her mouth, and finally did something she'd never done before. She called Philip first. He answered with a quiet, "Yes?" She hated the way her voice cracked. I need your help." There was silence on the line. Then, "Where?" He met her outside the hospital, less than an hour later. No suit this time. Just a charcoal gray sweater and slacks, his coat unbuttoned against the chill. He looked softer, somehow, though the edge of him never left. He didn't ask what was wrong. She handed him the folder of treatment forms. That was all. He skimmed the pages quickly, lips pressed together in thought. His eyes flicked across the lines of numbers like he was memorizing them. "How soon do they need payment?" he asked. "End of the week." He nodded. "It'll be handled." "No." He paused, looking up. "No, I don't want a miracle, Philip. I want a deal." He blinked once. "A deal." "Yes. Terms. Boundaries." His lips twitched slightly. Most people don't negotiate with someone about to save their sister's life. I'm not most people. Clearly. She stepped closer, fire blooming in her throat. "If you do this, it's not because I'm yours. It's not because I owe you. It's not because you'll collect later. It's not a trade." "And what do I get?" he asked, voice low. "My trust," she said. "Eventually, if you earn it." Philip studied her. Really looked like she was a painting he didn't want to misinterpret. "Done," he said, after a long moment. "No strings. And no disappearing after," she added. "You don't get to swoop in like some tuxedoed savior and then vanish." He tilted his head. "You want me to stay? I want you to stop acting like this is a fairy tale. Because if you do this, we're going to be in each other's lives. And I don't know what that looks like. But I won't let you ghost when things get complicated." Philip's mouth curved slightly. "Ghosting isn't really my style. I'm serious. So am I. Elizabeth exhaled. Fine. Then we're in this. He held her gaze. We're in this. 2 days later, the hospital administrator called Elizabeth into his office. He smiled too much. Talked like someone who'd just been personally thanked by the Pope. Turns out the foundation had funds set aside, he said. One of our private donors made a call. Cover the first 3 months in full. Elizabeth blinked. Which foundation? He gave her a name she'd never heard. Probably fake. She smiled tightly. Tell them thank you. I already did, the administrator said. They asked me to pass along their regards and their respect. When she left the office, her hands were trembling. Not from fear, from a first wave of relief she'd felt in months. That night, she texted Philip. Dinner. My choice this time. He didn't respond immediately. Then, send me the address. I'll be there. She picked a place that smelled like home. Red vinyl booths. A chalkboard menu. A woman named Carla behind the counter who made peach cobbler that could silence any argument. Elizabeth hadn't eaten here in 2 years, not since Maya's first diagnosis. But she remembered every bite. Philip arrived in a sleek black car, but dressed simply. She wondered, not for the first time, how a man with eyes like storm clouds and hands like he'd broken things wore gentleness so well. He joined her without ceremony. You chose well, he said. I need to know if you eat like a normal person. I don't, he said, picking up a fork. But I'll try. They both ordered the fried catfish platter. The moment felt almost ordinary, until Elizabeth leaned forward, voice low. Why are you helping me? He took a breath. Because I can. That's not an answer. He met her eyes. Because I watch you sit in a restaurant where people treat the poor like a disease, and you didn't flinch. Because you asked nothing from me. And because I don't want to be the man I was. What kind of man were you? Philip looked down at his plate. The kind who solved problems by making new ones. She chewed slowly. And now, I'm still deciding. You're rich, she said bluntly. Yes. You're dangerous. He nodded. But you're trying. Another nod. Then try harder. His smile was slow. Is that your version of a pep talk? It's my version of giving a damn. They ate in silence for a moment. Then Philip leaned in. I like you. Elizabeth didn't blink. That's a terrible idea. Most of my ideas are. She looked at him. Really looked. Are you safe? He didn't answer right away. No, he said honestly. But I'd never hurt you. That's not what I asked. I don't know how to be safe, he admitted. But I know how to protect what matters. Elizabeth set her fork down. Then maybe don't protect me. Just be honest. I can do that. Good. Because if I find out you're lying, I'll take that envelope you gave me and set it on fire. He chuckled. Fair enough. When the check came, he didn't move. Elizabeth beat him to it. She placed a few bills on the table. Cash she couldn't really spare, but enough to mean she wasn't a guest this time. My treat. He raised a brow. You sure? Yes, she said. It's important. Philip nodded, accepting it without protest. That, more than anything, made her believe him. Outside, the wind had picked up. Her coat wasn't thick enough, but she refused to shiver. Philip walked her to the bus stop again. No offers to drive her. No pitying glances. Just a presence beside her. Solid. Quiet. As the bus pulled up, he looked at her one last time. You're different, he said. Elizabeth climbed aboard, turned at the steps, and said, So are you. The doors closed between them. But the space didn't feel like a goodbye. The first thing Elizabeth noticed was the color coming back into Maya's cheeks. Not all at once, but in little flashes. The way she laughed louder. The way she rolled her eyes instead of sighing. The way she started arguing again about things that didn't matter, like whether hot sauce belonged on mac and cheese. It was healing in fragments, which for Elizabeth felt like learning how to breathe again. The treatment was working. Maya's white blood cell count had stabilized. Her appetite returned. The nurses smiled more during rounds. And though the prognosis was still cautious, Elizabeth clung to every inch of progress like a drowning woman to a rope. Philip had stayed true to his word. No strings, no shows of power, no follow-up calls asking for repayment. Just quiet help. And a name whispered once in the hospital hallways. Some shadow donor who'd made the entire clinic staff suddenly reevaluate how they treated a girl in scrubs and a maid uniform. Elizabeth didn't know what Philip had done. She didn't ask. Not yet. But she knew the truth was there, beneath the calm. Waiting. Their third dinner wasn't planned. Elizabeth had dropped off some paperwork at the clinic and found him waiting outside, leaning against a black town car with a paper cup in one hand and a grocery bag in the other. "What is that?" she asked, raising a brow. "Dinner," he said, holding up the bag like a peace offering. "Thought you might not have had time to eat." "I haven't," she admitted. "Then get in." She hesitated, then got into the car. He drove them to a small, empty park just off the expressway. There was no one there, just a few benches, a rusted slide, and the distant hum of traffic. Philip pulled a blanket from the trunk and laid it out under a tree. Then he opened the bag. Inside, chicken shawarma, lentil soup, soft pita, and a container of mango rice pudding. Elizabeth looked at him sideways. "You did not make this." "I did not," he admitted. "But the guy who did owes me 3 favors. I cashed in half of one." "You bartered for dinner? Would you prefer something transactional?" "I don't know what to prefer with you." They sat. A few birds called above. The air smelled like damp grass and streetlights. She didn't know how to explain that smell, but it had always been familiar. The scent of growing up with too little and walking home under broken bulbs that buzzed like dying flies. "This is good," she admitted around a bite of shawarma. "Told you." They ate in silence for a moment, the blanket grounding them in something that felt suspiciously like peace. Then Philip said, "Tell me something I don't know about you." Elizabeth chewed, swallowed. "That's a very open-ended prompt." "I'm interested." "Why?" "Because I want to know what matters to you. Not just what's broken." She looked at him sharply. He didn't flinch. "Fine," she said. "When I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer. I had this beat-up laptop, and I used to sit on the floor of the laundromat while Maya folded clothes. I wrote stories about dragons and girls who never needed help." "Why dragons?" "Because they don't need saving." "And why girls who didn't need help?" She shrugged. "Because I always did." He was quiet a moment. Then, "Do you still write?" "I stopped when I realized stories didn't pay for groceries." "Some stories do." "Not mine." Philip looked down. "I'd read them." "Don't lie." "I'm not." "You have a sharp way of speaking. I imagine your prose cuts." Elizabeth studied him. His words were careful. Always had weight. But something about the way he said cut, like it meant something else. Her chest tightened. "Your turn. To tell you something?" "Yes." "One thing." No vagueness. Philip hesitated. Then, carefully, "I don't remember the last time I trusted anyone." She blinked. "I mean really trusted," he clarified. "Not employees. Not lawyers. Not even family. Just letting someone in. It's been years." She wanted to ask why. What had broken him? But instead, she asked, "Do you want that to change?" He turned to her. "You already have." The space between them shifted. The world got quieter. The tension wasn't dramatic or fiery. It was slow, like a tide pulling sand between toes. His hand was close to hers. His eyes dipped toward her lips. And for a breath, the entire universe leaned forward. Elizabeth didn't move. Philip did. His hand brushed hers. He leaned in. Their faces were inches apart. Then, a phone rang. Hers. She jumped, fumbling for it, heart hammering. It was the hospital. She picked up. Maya had fainted. Nothing critical. Just anemia. But Elizabeth rushed over anyway. Philip offered to drive. She didn't argue. At the hospital, Elizabeth sat beside Maya's bed while Philip waited in the hallway. When Maya woke up, the first thing she said was that him? The guy from the restaurant? Elizabeth smiled despite the panic in her chest. Yes. He's hot. In a morally questionable way. Go back to sleep. You like him? Maya whispered. Elizabeth exhaled. It's complicated. All the best things are. Later, Philip walked her back to the apartment. It was late. The hallway light flickered like always. The door stuck slightly, as it always had. He paused at her door. I'm not good at this, he said. At walking me home, at being close to someone. Elizabeth leaned against the frame. I'm not asking you to be perfect. Just real. He met her eyes. She held his gaze. You're still hiding something, she said quietly. I know. Is it going to hurt me? His jaw clenched. Not if I can help it. That's not a no. No, he said. It's not. She nodded once. Then I'll ask again when I'm ready. Will you still let me see you? I haven't slammed the door yet, have I? He smiled, tired and soft. "Good night, Elizabeth." "Good night, Philip." He left. She stood in the doorway for a long time after. Her heart pulled in two directions, trust and danger. And yet, she didn't shut him out. Not yet. The air in Philip's apartment didn't smell like money. It smelled like clean steel and distance, like a place that had never held company for too long. Elizabeth sat on the edge of a leather couch that looked too new to have ever been used. The view from the floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the city like a war map. Every light below looked like a lie. Philip stood by the window with his hands in his pockets. The way he held himself tonight, straighter, heavier, told her something had shifted, and not in her favor. "I wanted you to hear it from me," he said, voice low. Elizabeth didn't answer. She just waited. He turned, eyes darker than usual. "I'm not what you think I am." "I don't think you're simple," she replied. He gave a small smile, bitter. "I'm not a businessman. Not in the way people mean it. I figured. I didn't just inherit restaurants and import companies. I took them. The ones I couldn't buy, I bought with leverage. With fear. Still," she said nothing. "I run things. Not legally. I built something big, Elizabeth. Quiet, clean on the surface, but underneath it's blood and shadows. I control half the city's ports. The union votes don't move unless I say so. The cops in some districts don't make arrests unless I approve the name on the warrant." He paused. "Let's settle. I've never touched drugs," he added quickly. "Never run girls, never dealt in weapons. I've done things, yes, but I've drawn lines. I've tried to keep my world contained." Elizabeth stared at him. "And when you can't?" His eyes didn't flinch. "Then people disappear." A beat passed between them. Not fear, not quite, but gravity and understanding. "I had to know," he said quietly, before we went any further. She stood slowly, her arms crossing without meaning to. A defensive habit. How many people know this side of you? Not many. Fewer still who are still alive. She raised an eyebrow. "That's not funny. I wasn't joking." She moved to the window, needing distance, needing breath. Outside, the city looked no different. But now she saw something else. How deep the current ran beneath the streets, she thought she knew. "You saved my sister's life with blood money," she said. Not as an accusation, but as fact. "Yes, you eat at diners and quote poetry and act like you're trying to change, but people are afraid of you. Yes, I should run. You should." She turned, her throat tight. "Why haven't I?" "I don't know," he said, voice almost tender. "But I hoped you wouldn't. You didn't have to tell me this." "I did," he said, stepping forward, closing the distance inch by inch. "Because if I didn't, and you found out another way, it would have destroyed everything we've started." Elizabeth's heart thudded so hard it felt like it echoed in her ears. "You're dangerous, Philip. I know, but you're not cruel." "No," he said, "but I used to be. I know what it looks like." She shook her head, trying to think around the chaos. "Do you want to change? Really? Or do you just want me to think you do?" "I want to change," he said, "but I don't know how without becoming someone I've never been." Silence stretched between them. Then she asked the question that had been forming since their first dinner. "Who are you without the power?" He didn't answer. That scared her more than anything. She didn't storm out. She didn't stay either. She walked past him, slowly, her hand brushing his arm just briefly, a signal that this wasn't punishment. "Just pause." "I need time," she said. He nodded, jaw clenched. "Take all you need. I'm not saying goodbye." He looked at her, voice hoarse. "Then say what it is." "It's me stepping outside the blast radius." He winced, and she left. 3 floors below, a man in a parked sedan lifted his phone. "She left the building," he said. "Alone. Just like you predicted." "Good." A voice replied on the other end. "Keep following her. If she's soft on him, we'll need leverage." "What about Matthew?" "Leave him be. For now." Elizabeth didn't know she was being watched. Didn't know the man who'd helped her was already being hunted. Didn't know her heart had already picked a side. The knock on her apartment door wasn't friendly. It wasn't forceful either. It was precise. 3 taps, evenly spaced. Like a code being entered. Elizabeth opened it without thinking. 2 men in suits. Gray. Government issue smiles. The taller one held up a badge like it was a winning hand. Ms. Andrew? Special Agent Mark Dillard. This is Agent Price. We'd like to speak with you. Elizabeth's stomach turned, but she stepped aside. They didn't wait for an invitation. They didn't sit, either. Dillard went to the window, glancing out like he was expecting someone to sneak in. Price stood near her bookshelf, eyeing her cracked copy of The Color Purple like it might confess something. We know about Philip Matthew, Dillard said. Elizabeth stiffened. You'll have to be more specific. Price smiled slow. We know you've had dinner with him. Frequent contact. We have footage. Phone records. Wasn't aware that was illegal. It's not, Dillard said, turning. But he is. Elizabeth crossed her arms. Then arrest him. We're building a case. Build faster. Price took a step forward. Ms. Andrew, do you know how Philip Matthew made his fortune? He owns restaurants. Shipping companies. Dillard snorted. He owns influence. He owns fear. Do you think a man like that invests in the community out of kindness? He helped my sister, she said, when no one else would. With money from extortion, racketeering, laundering. Shall I keep going? Elizabeth flinched. Look, Dillard said, softening. We're not here to punish you. We're here to protect you. People like Matthew use good people to hide their bad work. They hide behind pretty stories and wounded sisters. But in the end, they all fall. And anyone too close to them gets hurt. Elizabeth swallowed. What do you want? Price pulled a small box from his coat. Opened it. A recording device. Simple. Small. A wire. You wear this. One dinner. That's it. Get him talking. We'll do the rest. No. Elizabeth said immediately. You care about him? She didn't answer. Price nodded. Then do this. Save him. Save yourself. Because this ends one of two ways. He goes down with your help, or he goes down and takes you with him. Dillard stepped in. You don't need to make a decision now. You have 72 hours. Think about it. They handed her a card. No badge this time. Just a number. And then they were gone. That night, Elizabeth didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table, the wire box on one side, her phone on the other, and her thoughts circling like birds over a field already burning. She thought of Philip's voice. I want to change, but I don't know how. She thought of Maya, laughing again, walking again, alive because of him. She thought of her own hands, always scrubbing, always cleaning, and how for the first time in years, they didn't feel invisible. She couldn't wear the wire, but she couldn't walk away either. So she did what no one expected. She researched. She opened her laptop, logged into the university library with the trial student login she'd kept from a scholarship Philip helped her apply for. She started with public records, then went deeper. News articles, business filings, court transcripts. The more she read, the more the story began to split. Yes, Philip had built his empire with dirt, but it was the kind of dirt that fertilized, not the kind that destroyed. No drugs, no human trafficking, no bodies found in ditches. Instead, oddities, donations to clinics, legal funds for low-income tenants. A judge caught taking bribes, not from Philip, but from a state senator with connections to a rival crime ring. And deeper still, sealed documents, leaked emails. The real cancer wasn't Philip. It was the law itself. The FBI wasn't trying to stop Philip from hurting people. They were trying to stop him from testifying. Because if he flipped, if he talked, he wouldn't be confessing crimes. He'd be exposing the ones who were wearing the badges. At 3:17 a.m., Elizabeth stared at her wall. Then she picked up her phone. Dialed. Philip answered on the second ring. I need to see you, she said. When? Now. They met in the back of Tony's grill. The place was closed, but Philip had keys. Of course he did. She was already wearing the wire. Not for the FBI. For him. When she stepped inside, he looked at her the way he always did. Like she was the only person he didn't know how to control. I need you to listen, she said. Don't interrupt. He nodded. She pulled out her phone, set it on the table. Pressed record. They asked me to spy on you, she said. The FBI. They show me evidence, pictures, threats, everything. They want you out. But not because of what you've done. Because of what you know. Philip didn't blink. They're not after justice, she said. They're after silence. You've made enemies in the system. People who don't want their names in the papers. You're a liability. He sat slowly, the weight of it all settling in his posture. I wore the wire, she continued. But not for them. I wore it for us. He raised an eyebrow. Us? You're going to confess, she said. Not to crimes. To truths. You're going to give them what they want. Make them think they've won. And then, I'll send this recording to the Justice Department. Internal Affairs. To the press. To everyone. Every move they make to cover their own tracks will already be on the record. Philip stared at her, and then he did something that surprised even himself. He smiled. You really are the most dangerous person I've ever met. Elizabeth crossed her arms. I'm tired of being helpless. You're not. I don't want to be afraid of you, she said. So help me give them something they'll never see coming. Philip leaned back. Then slowly he nodded. Let's give them the performance of a lifetime. The restaurant lights were dimmed low enough to hide 1,000 secrets. Tony's grill didn't open for another 3 hours, but in the corner booth, a meeting that would upend half the city was already underway. Philip Matthew leaned forward, arms resting on the table, his voice calm, deliberate. Elizabeth sat across from him, palms resting flat against the worn Formica surface, her heart pounding so loud it was a wonder the wire hidden beneath her shirt didn't short-circuit from the tremors. The FBI was listening, but they weren't the only ones. A small wireless mic, disguised in a chipped pepper shaker, was transmitting every syllable to a private room 3 blocks away. There, in the back office of a low-profile law firm owned by one of Philip's oldest allies, 3 men in tailored suits and steel nerves were listening and recording. One of them was Philip's lawyer. Another was a Pulitzer-winning journalist. The third? An internal affairs contact Elizabeth had found during her late-night research, someone who'd once been discredited for trying to take down a dirty federal prosecutor. Everyone in that room had skin in the game, and Elizabeth was now the queen on the board. Tell me again, she said, her voice crisp but uncertain, perfect for the part. What exactly are you into, Philip? Philip sighed, leaning back as if tired of hiding. You sure you want to know? I'm wearing a wire, she said pointedly. So yes. He smirked. Then let's make it good. He reached into his coat, not for a weapon, but for a small black notebook. One that looked old, weathered, too real to be fake, and too fake to be real. Names, payouts, schedules, judges, cops, city officials. He set it down in front of her. You could collapse the entire Eastern District with what's in there. Elizabeth picked it up, flipping pages filled with deliberately convincing lies. None of it was true. Neither is folding sheets at 5 a.m. I don't know if I can build something without leaning on the old tools. You already have. Philip went quiet. Then, and you? Elizabeth shrugged. Maya's recovery is going better than expected. The doctors are optimistic. I think I'm going to finish the degree. Apply to the full scholarship. Maybe work in advocacy. Social work? She nodded. Someone needs to fight for the people who can't wear suits to court. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. You'll be good at it. I'll be relentless, she corrected. Even better. They stood there for a while. 2 people with their feet on the ashes of former lives. That night, Elizabeth lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of her small, clean apartment. It still smelled like cheap paint and citrus cleaner. Her phone buzzed once. A message. Philip, just wanted to say, thank you. For everything. If this is goodbye, I understand. She stared at the screen, the weight of it pressing down like a stone. Because she could walk away now. He had nothing left. No money. No power. No empire. All that remained was the man. And that terrified her more than a Mafia rumors ever had. Because what if she stayed? What if this was real? She didn't text back. She showed up. The next morning, Philip opened his front door to find her standing there with 2 coffees and a folder tucked under her arm. He froze. She held out the coffee. You forgot to sign your name on the application for the business permit. He blinked. What? She shoved the folder into his chest. You're not doing this alone. He stared at her, then down at the folder, then back, and he laughed. A real, tired, broken laugh. Elizabeth, I don't have anything left. You have enough, she said. And besides, she took a step forward. You have me. They drank coffee on his front stoop, watching the street come alive with noise and chaos and cars that didn't care what day it was. The city didn't notice them, Didn't know what they'd survived. But that was fine, because for the first time, Elizabeth didn't need the world to see her. Just him. And he did. The ribbon didn't cut easily. The ceremonial scissors were dull, like they'd been borrowed from a kindergarten craft drawer instead of bought new for the occasion. But when the red fabric finally tore in two and applause broke out from the crowd gathered under the tin awning, Philip Matthew didn't flinch. He stood beside Elizabeth, a simple white button-down rolled to his elbows, a name tag that read director on his chest. Not CEO, not president, just a man with sleeves rolled up and dirt under his fingernails. A year ago, he'd ruled half the city from a corner office above a silent war. Now, he ran a nonprofit with 10 employees and a daily coffee order that never came out right. The building behind them, the Bridge Project, was small, low-slung, painted in calming colors. It had 6 classrooms, 1 computer lab, and a beat-up basketball court out back. It used to be a pawn shop. Now it was a second chance. Inside, kids from neighborhoods the city forgot were learning how to build resumes, how to talk to banks, how to code, how to cook, how to breathe. Philip had taught the first class himself. Nobody believed him when he said he'd been a problem solver in his old life. Until he told them that in every problem, there's always a way out. You just have to be willing to lose something to find it. They understood that. He understood them. And when Elizabeth stepped onto the podium that day, diploma in hand, the gold tassel from her cap tucked neatly in her pocket, the kids erupted into cheers before she even spoke. She'd graduated 3 days earlier. Bachelor's in social work. Magna cum laude. She was the first speaker they'd ever had who also cleaned floors, changed bedpans, and once had $4.37 to her name. She spoke plainly. About survival. About choosing to stay angry and open. About forgiveness that didn't erase the past, but made peace with it. When she finished, Philip clapped the loudest. Maya whistled from the front row, healthy and vibrant in a bright yellow jumpsuit. She said made her look like a sunflower with attitude. It had been nearly 14 months since her last treatment. The scans were clear. Her voice was strong again, too strong sometimes, but no one complained. That evening, as the sun fell behind the rusted rooftops, Philip and Elizabeth stood alone inside the new center's break room. The tiles still smelled of grout. The fridge buzzed like it wasn't sure how to exist yet. Elizabeth leaned against the counter, eyes half-lidded from exhaustion and contentment. Philip stepped closer, holding a small velvet box. She looked up. "What's that?" He said nothing, just opened it. Inside, a simple gold band. No diamonds, no flourish, just permanence. She stared. He didn't kneel. She would have hated that. Instead, he held her hand, placing the ring in her palm. "I lied to you that first night," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Oh," he nodded. "When I said helping you was an investment in the future." Her lips curled. "Wasn't it?" "No," he said softly. "You can't invest in something that doesn't exist yet." She stilled. "You didn't show me a future," he said. "You gave me one." Tears sprang behind her eyes, hot and fast. "You ruined my life, you know," she whispered. He smiled chest height. "I know. You dragged me into a world full of violence and secrets. Guilty. And then made me fall in love with someone who'd tear it all down just to build something honest." He leaned forward, forehead resting against hers. "I'd do it again." She closed her eyes. "Me too." They didn't tell many people. No grand wedding. Just a small courthouse ceremony. A borrowed dress for Maya. A ring that fit without needing to be resized. The judge cried more than they did. Afterward, they went out for hot dogs and root beer floats at the food truck where they'd had their third real date. Philip spilled mustard on his shirt. Elizabeth laughed so hard she nearly choked. It was perfect. Months later, people started asking questions. Reporters wanted to know where the former crime boss had gone. Some said he'd fled. Some said he was hiding in Argentina, playing chess with retired arms dealers. But the people in the neighborhood knew. He was behind the counter, fixing printers, teaching kids how to negotiate without fists, holding Elizabeth's hand during lunch breaks, helping Maya draft speeches for her new side gig, motivational speaking at city youth centers. He was just there, and every time someone tried to make him into a myth, Elizabeth would smile and say, "He's not a legend. He's mine." Years later, Elizabeth stood at the back of a lecture hall, watching one of their students give a speech about breaking cycles. Philip leaned beside her, older now, a little grayer at the temples. Still watching people like puzzles he didn't want to break. Do you miss it? She asked quietly. The money. No, she said. The power. He thought for a moment. No, he replied. Because I finally figured out what it's for. To build. To protect. She nodded. Then, do you ever think about how it started? All the time. The restaurant. He nodded. You. In that chair. That glass of water. You looked at me like I was something valuable. You were. I had $4 and a lemon wedge. And I had an empire built on fear. She smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. Equal exchange, she whispered. He wrapped his arm around her. Equal exchange. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If this one moved you, stirred something deep, or simply made you stay up way too late, then you're in for even more. Because the next story, it's crazier, deeper, and more gripping than you can imagine. Intrigue, obsession, power, redemption. It's all waiting, so don't miss it. You'll love what comes next.